Will Cutter stepped off the train, the rhythmic chugging of the locomotive fading into the distance as he took in the familiar landscape of Redemption Ridge. The air was thick with memories, each breath mingling the scent of pine and earth with the bitter taste of ash and regret. After 5 long years in a Confederate prison camp, he had returned to this once vibrant town, now cloaked in a pall of fear and despair. He walked along the dirt road, his boots kicking up dust that settled like a shroud over the memories of laughter and community. The storefronts that had once bustled with activity now stood silent, their windows boarded up as if too afraid to witness the darkness that had descended upon them. Will's heart sank at the sight of the church, its doors barred, its steeple leaning slightly as if bowing to the weight of sorrow that had gripped its congregation. As he approached what remained of his family homestead, a pang of loss twisted in his gut. The small wooden house where his mother had tended to gardens full of life now lay in ruins, the charred remains a stark reminder of Silas Granger's tyranny. Granger, a man who wielded power like a blade, had taken everything from him and countless others. The sheriff, once an ally, had become a puppet for Granger's cruel ambitions, silencing those brave enough to speak out against his oppressive rule. Will's longing for peace clashed violently with the reality before him. He sought only to settle down and mend his fractured spirit after years of war. Yet in this town, peace felt like a distant dream, overshadowed by Granger's iron grip. Memories flooded back, the sound of gunfire, the cries of men in battle, reminders of a life he thought he had left behind. But as he gazed over the ashes of his past, something ignited within him. The weight of injustice pressed heavily on his shoulders. It demanded action. He could no longer stand idly by while Granger's men continued their reign of terror. Resolute, he reached for his old Colt tucked beneath his coat, a symbol of both his past and potential future. With each deliberate step towards reclaiming Redemption Ridge, Will Cutter felt the old soldier within him awaken. The path ahead would not be easy, the stakes were high, but deep down, he knew that vengeance was now intertwined with his quest for peace. And as whispers of hope began to stir among those still brave enough to resist, Will understood that he was not alone in this fight for justice. As Will Cutter navigated the familiar yet haunting streets of Redemption Ridge, an unsettling silence enveloped him. The vibrant town he once knew, alive with laughter and community spirit, had been reduced to a husk split apart by fear and despair. Even the sun seemed to cast a dimmer glow, as if reluctant to shine on the harsh reality laid bare before him. Shuttered storefronts lined the main street like sentinels guarding secrets. Once bustling shops that had welcomed townsfolk were now cloaked in darkness, their windows boarded up to conceal what lay within, a chilling reflection of the lives crushed under Silas Granger's oppressive rule. Each step he took stirred memories of better times, children playing in the streets, townsfolk exchanging stories, and families gathering for Sunday services. Those days felt like a faded photograph, idyllic yet out of reach. Will's heart sank further as he approached the church, its doors barred against any flicker of hope. The steeple sagged as if weighed down by sorrow and loss. Those who had once sought solace within its walls now cowered in shadows, too frightened to gather for prayer or support. They had become prisoners in their own homes, chained by Granger's iron fist. As Will moved on, he caught snippets of hushed conversations between fearful residents whispering about the latest brutalities committed by Granger's men, intimidation tactics employed to keep anyone from daring to defy their tyrant. His anger simmered beneath the surface, each word struck like a blow against his conscience. Would they ever rise up, or would they continue to silently endure this bleak existence? The sight of his family homestead brought forth a flood of painful memories, the laughter shared over meals, the stories told by firelight, but now there was only charred wood and the ghost of what once stood proud and strong against life's storms. Silas Granger had not just claimed land, he had snatched away Will's legacy and left nothing but ruin in his wake. Standing amidst the ashes, Will felt unyielding resolve harden within him. This desolation could no longer go unchecked. Redemption Ridge deserved more than submission, it yearned for bravery amidst despair. He took a deep breath and whispered silent vows for justice, not just for himself but for all those who had suffered at Granger's hands. With renewed purpose coursing through him, Will Cutter began envisioning a plan, a way to unite those brave souls still hidden in fear and challenge the man who held their lives hostage. For every shadow cast over Redemption Ridge needed to meet its light again, it was time for hope to emerge from desolation. The grip of Silas Granger tightened around Redemption Ridge like a noose, stifling the life out of the town and its people. Fear permeated the air, settling into the bones of every resident who dared to tread the dusty streets. Granger's rule was marked not just by his wealth and land, but by a ferocity that bred despair among those who once called this place home. Will Cutter could feel the weight of that fear as he moved through the town, shadows flickering behind closed doors and windows that had become mere barriers against a cruel world outside. The sheriff, once a protector, had traded his badge for silver coins, betraying his oath to uphold the law. He was now nothing more than Granger's enforcer, a pawn in a game where lives hung in the balance. Whispers of intimidation echoed through empty alleys. Anyone brave enough to defy Granger faced brutal consequences. The church stood as a haunting reminder of what had been lost, a sanctuary now boarded up, its steeple leaning as if bowing to grief. No longer a beacon of hope and community, it symbolized the moral decay that had seeped into every corner of Redemption Ridge. Faithful congregants once filled its pews with prayers and hymns. Now they cowered in fear, too afraid to gather lest they draw attention from Granger's men. Will's heart hardened as he recalled stories shared within those walls, tales of resilience and unity that had long since faded into memory. The very essence of what made this town special was being suffocated under Granger's iron fist. As he walked past the church, he imagined what it would be like if courage could replace fear, a gathering of townsfolk standing together against their oppressor instead of hiding away. The thought sent shivers down his spine. It was time for change. Will envisioned rallying those still willing to fight back against Granger's tyranny, to awaken their spirits buried beneath layers of oppression. He knew it wouldn't be easy, many were too terrified to even speak out. But within him burned an unquenchable fire ignited by injustice. He envisioned gathering allies, those who had suffered in silence and yearned for something greater than mere survival. With each passing moment, Will Cutter felt more determined to inspire hope where there was none, to remind the people that they were not alone and that together they could reclaim their freedom from Silas Granger's suffocating grasp. It was time for Redemption Ridge to rise again, but first they needed someone brave enough to lead them into battle against their fears. As Will Cutter stood amidst the ruins of his family homestead, a profound sense of loss washed over him, leaving him wrestling with the ghosts of memories that now felt hauntingly distant. He had envisioned returning to Redemption Ridge as a time to find solace and reconnect with the remnants of his past, old friends, familiar faces, shared laughter echoing in the air. Instead, he was greeted by charred wood and ash, symbols of what had been taken from him, not just his home but the very essence of peace he longed to reclaim. Initially, Will hoped that by burying himself in these desolate surroundings, he might find a way to heal from the scars left by war. He yearned for quiet evenings spent reflecting on life, not the tumult of conflict. All he wanted was to lay down his arms and erase the memories of bloodshed that had followed him from the prison camp. But standing among the wreckage illuminated a harsh truth. Peace in Redemption Ridge was but a fleeting notion, snuffed out by Silas Granger's tyranny. As memories flickered through his mind like shadows, neighbors holding potlucks, children running freely under endless skies, the reality of what lay before him became suffocating. The streets were not just empty, they were haunted by despair and hopelessness. Will's heart ached for the vibrant community he once knew, now gripped by fear and silence as they succumbed to Granger's iron-fisted rule. He sensed their pain, it resonated within him, igniting an internal struggle between his desire for peace and his emerging need for justice. Each passing moment amplified his frustration at feeling powerless against such overwhelming darkness. He wanted nothing more than to slip into anonymity and rebuild his life away from conflict. Yet deep inside, dread began battling against that wish, a burgeoning recognition that such tranquility could only exist if Granger's tyranny was dismantled. And then came the realization, true peace would never flourish in a town where fear reigned supreme. Innocent lives continued to be threatened, while simple acts of rebellion crushed under Granger's brutal approach added weight to Will's conscience. It became clear that avoiding conflict was no longer an option. He had a choice before him. As Will surveyed what remained of his family legacy, he made a vow not just to remember but to act, to rise up not only in pursuit of his own peace but for every soul silenced by Granger's regime. The burning embers of vengeance began to merge with his desire for justice. If peace was the destination, then justice would be the path he needed to forge. And so began Will's transformation from a soldier seeking solace into a leader ready to reclaim Redemption Ridge, one step at a time. The flames flickered menacingly, consuming the remnants of Will Cutter's family home while casting eerie shadows on his past. This was not merely a structure to Will, it represented his childhood, a sanctuary filled with laughter, warmth, and memories forged in love. But now, as he watched it burn, rage surged within him like a wildfire, an inferno ignited by grief and loss. The destruction was a brutal reminder of Silas Granger's unyielding tyranny, and it awakened something dormant deep inside Will, a thirst for vengeance. For too long, he had witnessed the slow degradation of Redemption Ridge, feeling the weight of despair settle over the townsfolk like a heavy fog. Their silence had been deafening, echoes of fear stifling any thoughts of rebellion against Granger's iron grip. But the loss of his family homestead served as the final catalyst that propelled Will from passive observer into active defender, a leader who would no longer accept injustice. Will's heart raced as he surveyed the charred remains of his life's foundation. He felt an unquenchable fire burning within him, compelling him to act decisively against the man who had wrought such devastation upon his world. Thoughts of justice began to crystallize in his mind. This was no longer about personal peace or quiet reflection. It was about retribution for every family wronged under Granger's rule. With clenched fists and gritted teeth, Will dusted off the rifle he had sworn never to fire again and strapped on his old Colt. Memories of battle flooded back, lessons learned in the chaos of war now transformed into strategies for reclaiming his town. He would gather allies who shared his vision for a better future, whose spirits still flickered beneath layers of fear. He envisioned forming an unlikely coalition, a one-legged preacher seeking redemption, a drunken ex-lawman haunted by his past failures, and a sharpshooting saloon girl whose skills could turn the tide. As Will set out towards town once more, determination coursed through him like blood racing through his veins. Each step forward was fueled by visions of liberation, a community rising from ashes, no longer bound by fear but emboldened by unity and purpose. Justice would be served, not just for himself but for every soul crushed under Granger's oppressive hand. This newfound resolve gave him clarity. He was not simply fighting for revenge but for restoration, the reclamation of hope and dignity for all who had suffered. The embers of vengeance had transformed into a blazing desire for justice that could not be extinguished. Redemption Ridge would rise again, he vowed to make it so, one bullet at a time. Determined to reclaim Redemption Ridge, Will Cutter realized he could not do it alone. He needed allies, people willing to stand alongside him against Silas Granger's ruthless regime. As he roamed the shadowy streets, seeking those who still believed in the possibility of resistance, his mind turned to individuals within the town who might share his vision of justice. His first stop was the local church, now abandoned and morose but not entirely devoid of hope. It was there that he sought out Reverend Tobias, a one-legged preacher burdened by his own guilt and loss. Once a pillar of strength for the community, Tobias had become a mere whisper of whom he used to be, demoralized after witnessing his congregation succumb to fear. Yet something flickered in his eyes when Will approached. Perhaps it was the glimmer of faith rekindled by Will's boldness. The Reverend longed for redemption himself, yearning to make amends for abandoning his flock in their darkest hour. Together they shared stories, their own losses intertwining with a common purpose, and Tobias agreed to join Will on this perilous journey ahead. Next was Jake Monroe, the town's former sheriff turned drinker. Once respected for his courage and sense of justice, Jake now languished in a haze of liquor at the dusty saloon. Will found him seated alone at the bar, nursing regrets along with his whiskey. Convincing Jake to join him would take more than mere words. Finally, recalling stories from their soldier days sparked a flicker of nostalgia in Jake's weary eyes. They talked about honor and bravery and how those concepts might still exist beneath layers of resentment. Amidst the lingering memories, Will offered Jake one last chance at redemption, the opportunity to fight back against oppression rather than drown in guilt. Lastly, Will knew he needed someone with skills beyond those wielded on battlefields or in sermons. He needed a sharpshooter with nerves of steel. That brought him to Maeve, a skilled saloon girl known for her unwavering aim whenever trouble arose within the bustling establishment she worked in. Moving with grace under pressure and holding her own in a world filled with danger, she had long caught Will's attention as someone who refused to yield easily. After some gentle persuasion and an appeal to her sense of justice, Maeve agreed to lend her talents. With Reverend Tobias's spiritual guidance, Jake Monroe's hardened resilience, and Maeve's deadly precision combined with his own resolve, Will Cutter felt his unlikely alliance forming, a coalition bound not only by vengeance but also by hope for Redemption Ridge's future. With each member carrying their scars of past betrayals, together they prepared to awaken the town's dormant spirit and rise against Silas Granger's tyranny, ready to reclaim their lives and restore what had once brought them joy as a community. With their alliance forged, Will Cutter and his newfound companions gathered in the dimly lit back room of the saloon, where the scent of whiskey mingled with the muted echoes of laughter from the bar. The atmosphere buzzed with an electric tension, each member acutely aware of the weight of their endeavor. This was a critical juncture. They needed a solid plan to reclaim Redemption Ridge and confront Silas Granger's iron grip. Will took center stage, his resolve evident as he outlined the first steps of their counteroffensive. They needed intelligence and understanding of Granger's operations, key locations, and the movements of his men. The group agreed that knowledge would be their greatest weapon. Maeve leaned forward, her keen eyes glinting with determination. "I know this town better than anyone," she asserted confidently. "I can infiltrate Granger's men at the saloon and gather information while playing the part of an unwitting flirt." Jake nodded, feeling reinvigorated by Maeve's suggestion. "I still have some contacts from my days as sheriff," he added, his voice steadying as he found purpose in the conversation. "I can reach out to those who may be willing to talk. Fear has kept them silent, but perhaps they'll feel emboldened if they know we're planning something." Reverend Tobias was quieter than the others, his thoughts racing as he contemplated how best to support their cause. Finally, he spoke up. "We must also rally those who believe in our fight, those who have hidden in fear for far too long. If we can spark even a flicker of bravery in others, we might create a ripple effect." His words resonated through the room, solidifying their shared mission. As they continued to strategize, Will felt a connection forming among them, a camaraderie that transcended their individual struggles. Each person carried scars from their pasts, yet together they embodied a collective strength. Will encouraged an atmosphere of honesty. "We must confront our demons as we prepare for this fight. I'm determined not just for justice, but for each of us to find our redemption." Over that evening and into the night, plans took shape. They carefully mapped out key areas in town where Granger's men operated, discussed possible ambush points, and outlined how to coordinate their efforts effectively. Each voice contributed invaluable insights, blending tactics with personal stories that revealed their shared humanity and suffering. As dawn approached, a sense of urgency filled the air. They knew they would need to act quickly before fear could reestablish its hold over the townsfolk. With a plan in place and hope ignited within them, Will Cutter looked at his allies, these unlikely companions united by purpose, and felt a surge of confidence. Redemption Ridge's spirit had begun to awaken, and together they would challenge Silas Granger's tyranny head-on. The fight for their home was just beginning. As dawn broke over Redemption Ridge, Will Cutter and his allies set their plan into motion, the air thick with anticipation and trepidation. Their first target was a small outpost where Granger's men frequently gathered, a place where they could gather valuable intelligence and disrupt the enemy's operations. With Maeve leading the way, her keen eye scanning for danger, the group moved stealthily through the underbrush. The confrontation came quicker than expected. As they approached the outpost, a few guards lounged lazily outside, unaware of the storm brewing just beyond their sight. Will signaled to his team, and they moved in unison, relying on Maeve's sharpshooting skills to take out the sentries before they could raise an alarm. The crack of her rifle echoed sharply in the morning air as she eliminated the first guard with perfect precision. However, as they advanced into enemy territory, chaos erupted. Another guard appeared from around a corner, shouting a warning before Will's group could react. The tranquility of their mission shattered in an instant. Will's heart raced as he drew his Colt, adrenaline surging through him as he joined Jake in returning fire. The ensuing skirmish was fierce but short-lived. Their surprise attack had caught most of Granger's men off guard. Yet it was not without cost. Will felt a pang of guilt as one of Granger's men fell to the ground, realizing that this battle would not be without moral consequences. Once inside the outpost, they quickly gathered what information they could, maps indicating troop placements and supply routes that would prove vital for future attacks against Granger's forces. As they turned to leave, however, reinforcements began flooding in from nearby trees. Granger's men had regrouped faster than anticipated. Retreating became a desperate scramble as bullets whizzed past them. Reverend Tobias found himself shielding a fallen comrade while urging others to keep moving forward. Jake struggled with memories of his past failures but fought desperately to protect his new allies. Maeve took cover behind a barrel, firing at any approaching threat while keeping an eye on her friends. The escape back to town felt like an eternity. Every step was fraught with danger. Despite their victory at the outpost and valuable intel gained, each skirmish tested their resolve and unity further. The toll weighed heavily on Will's conscience. Each confrontation brought them closer to their goal, but also deeper into conflict. As they regrouped at their hideout later that evening, breathless and battered yet alive, it became clear that this fight demanded more than just skill with weapons. It required unwavering resolve against both external foes and internal fears. Will looked around at his companions, each scarred by battle yet standing tall, and knew this was just the beginning of many trials ahead. Together they would face whatever came next on this path toward liberation from Silas Granger's tyranny. As Will Cutter and his allies deepened their campaign against Silas Granger's tyranny, the themes of faith and redemption began to emerge prominently among them. Each member of the group grappled with their own past, confronting the ghosts that haunted their lives while striving to create a better future for Redemption Ridge. Reverend Tobias often found himself reflecting on his role in the community and the weight of his previous inaction. Once a man of unwavering faith, he had fallen into despair after abandoning his congregation during the darkest days under Granger's rule. As they moved from skirmish to skirmish, Tobias felt a flicker of redemption each time he encouraged his comrades, reminding them that hope could be reclaimed even in the bleakest circumstances. He became a source of moral strength, often leading discussions around faith and forgiveness, emphasizing that their fight was not just physical but a spiritual awakening as well. Jake Monroe's struggles with guilt offered another layer to this exploration of faith. Haunted by memories of his past as sheriff, he wrestled with feelings of inadequacy for having failed to protect those he once swore to shield. Every confrontation with Granger's men served as a painful reminder of what he had lost and what he still hoped to restore. Yet with each act of bravery he witnessed among his companions, Jake began to find solace and purpose within their collective mission. It was in these moments that he realized redemption was possible, not only for himself but for the entire town if they could rise together against oppression. Maeve, too, battled her own demons, having spent years living on the fringes of society. Initially seen as nothing more than a saloon girl, her sharpshooting prowess became a beacon of hope for the group. She often shared stories of her life before the chaos, revealing how she had turned to drinking and numbing her pain but now sought something greater, freedom for herself and her community. With each shot fired from her rifle, she felt empowered, reclaiming the identity that had been stripped away from her in silence. As they rallied together, their individual struggles transformed into a shared journey toward justice. By embracing their vulnerabilities and mistakes, they forged an unbreakable bond anchored in mutual understanding and respect. Will Cutter's leadership flourished as he witnessed this transformation. It became clear that their battle was not solely against Granger, but also an internal fight for identity and worth. With each clash against Granger's forces, they didn't just seek revenge, they cultivated faith in each other and the possibility of redemption through their actions. As Will looked around at his companions, each scarred yet resolute, he recognized that while they were fighting for justice, they were also reclaiming their souls in a world that seemed devoid of it. This newfound purpose became the heartbeat of their rebellion, a testament that faith can flourish even in adversity when kindled by shared hopes and dreams for a brighter tomorrow. The sun hung high in the sky over Redemption Ridge, casting long shadows as the town prepared for the climactic showdown between Will Cutter and Silas Granger. The residents, once paralyzed by fear, now gathered to witness the confrontation that would decide their fate. Whispers of hope floated through the crowd, a testament to how far they had come, transformed by Will's leadership and the courage they had found within themselves. As high noon approached, Will stood in the dusty street, his heart pounding with adrenaline and anticipation. He felt the weight of his allies behind him, Reverend Tobias with his calming presence, Jake Monroe's steely determination, and Maeve poised with her rifle, ready to intervene if needed. Each of them had fought their own battles leading up to this moment, and now their collective resolve was palpable. At the other end of the street, Silas Granger emerged from the shadows, flanked by his men, a sinister grin plastered across his face. The sight of him stirred a mixture of rage and fear in Will's gut. This was the man who had taken everything from him, his home, his family's legacy, and countless lives in Redemption Ridge. The air crackled with tension as the two opponents locked eyes, an unspoken challenge passing between them. "Are you ready to surrender your little rebellion, Cutter?" Granger called out, his voice dripping with mockery. "You think you can take back what's mine? This town belongs to me." Will's grip tightened on his Colt as he stepped forward, a burning clarity in his voice. "This town belongs to its people, Granger. No longer will we cower under your tyranny. Today marks the end of your reign." With that declaration, time seemed to freeze for a heartbeat. The townsfolk held their breath as Will faced the embodiment of oppression itself. It was more than just a battle for land, it was a fight for freedom, dignity, and redemption. Without warning, Granger's men surged forward, weapons drawn. In that instant, chaos erupted. The sound of gunfire rang out across the street as Maeve's sharpshooting skills came into play, her bullets finding their mark with deadly precision. Jake moved with renewed vigor, defending his comrades against Granger's goons, while Reverend Tobias shouted words of encouragement to rally the townsfolk standing on the periphery. The conflict intensified, a whirlwind of action and emotion as Will fought with every ounce of strength he possessed. Each shot fired was not only a blow against Granger, but also a step toward reclaiming his own identity and purpose. As the dust settled around them, it became clear that this confrontation would determine not just who controlled Redemption Ridge, but whether hope could truly flourish in a world long overshadowed by despair. In these final moments of battle, Will Cutter realized that victory would come not just from triumphing over Granger's tyranny, but also from solidifying the bonds formed during this struggle, forged in faith, resilience, and a shared vision for a brighter future. As he faced down his greatest enemy, Will felt a surge of determination. Together with his allies and community behind him, they would rise again, no matter the outcome of this decisive clash. As the dust settled over Redemption Ridge, the aftermath of the climactic showdown began to reveal its true cost. Will Cutter stood in the middle of the street, surveying the remnants of both the battle and his journey. The air hung thick with the acrid smell of gunpowder, mingling with the faint scent of blood, both a reminder of the lives lost and the struggles endured. While victory pulsed through the town's spirit, Will couldn't shake off the weight of the choices made along the way. Surrounded by his allies, Reverend Tobias, Jake Monroe, and Maeve, he took a moment to reflect on their shared journey. Each had faced their inner demons amid the chaos, but now they stood together in solidarity breathed into them from field hours before. Will felt gratitude swell within him for their unwavering support, yet visions of sacrifice lingered in his mind, casting a shadow over his triumph. "This fight was never just about reclaiming land," Reverend Tobias said softly, placing a hand on Will's shoulder. "It was about regaining our faith, not just in our town or our cause, but in ourselves." The preacher's voice trembled slightly as he acknowledged their journey through turmoil toward redemption. The impact of those words resonated deeply within Will. They mirrored his own grappling with identity amidst loss. Jake stepped forward, his eyes reflecting a profound understanding that transcended words. "I always thought I failed this town," he said, taking a hesitant breath, "but seeing people standing tall today reminds me that it takes courage to rise again. Redemption isn't just mine, it's ours." The cornered strength within him shone through as he spoke to his scars and struggles, each one serving as a reminder of resilience rather than failure. Maeve adjusted her rifle across her back and surveyed their surroundings. "We've done more than take down Granger. We've shown everyone that hope can flourish even after hard-fought battles." Her voice held an empowering certainty that ignited sparks of renewed determination among them. As Will absorbed their sentiments, clarity washed over him, the understanding that true peace wouldn't merely be built upon vanquishing adversaries. It would require rebuilding trust, unity, and purpose within their community. He envisioned a future where no one lived in fear, where old wounds could heal through collaboration rather than vengeance. Yet there would be challenges ahead as whispers of new threats began to circle. Even victories come at great costs. But as he looked around at his comrades, now woven tightly into a tapestry formed by struggle and sacrifice, Will felt energized by their collective resolve. They would face whatever emerged together, battling not just for justice but for lasting peace in a town yearning for healing. In that moment of resolute reflection, will Cutter embrace not only his triumph but also his commitment to guiding Redemption Ridge toward a brighter tomorrow, one forged through faith, compassion, and unwavering courage against all odds.